Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, our mutual escape from the exhausting nonsense of daily living and into a world of curiosity, adventure, and some of the driest humor mankind has ever known. So yeah, I did it. I got the scenery of Jacksonville to work just well enough to finally get a flight in. As most of you already know, this is my hometown of the last quarter century. And if you know that, you also know how much it has pained me that the scenery up until now has been so awful that it has been absolutely unflyable, in my opinion. And just to warn you, it's still not great, but it is flyable. And I feel like it would violate everything this channel stands for if I neglected my own hometown, so we're going to do it. And not only that, but for the first time in I don't even know how long, look who we get to fly with. Our man Chet, back again. I don't even remember the last time we were in a plane that Chet got to come along, so this is very, very exciting. All right, let's get this thing started up real quick. I'll show you the Google map, show you where we're going, tell you about the add-ons, and some other cool stuff along the way. So let's get the battery on, alternator on, fuel pump on low. And is our fuel on? Yep, we're good to go there. So we need to give it some mixture, full prop, a little bit of throttle, then pull the mixture back. I'm just going to do this with my mouse, and then start it. There we go. And we're on. Okay, get our transponder set up here. On standby for now. Pull back that throttle a little bit. Let's go ahead and shut our window so don't forget about that. All right, let's look at the Google map real quick before we get going. All right, so there's Jacksonville. Florida obviously down here. Georgia's up there. And let's go ahead and zoom in a bit here. And you can tell where I am at right now in Jacksonville. There's where I'm located. Okay, so we're taking off right here from a little private airstrip, which I'll tell you about in a second, by the Pablo Creek Club. We'll fly out here, check out the TPC Sawgrass, Ponte Vedra, all the beaches. Come up to the mouth of the St. Johns River, check out a big Navy base up there. Come on down here, cruise around, check out downtown, the stadium, some of the skyscrapers, the older, nicer part of town. Or the nicer, older part of town, I should probably say. There'll be a big Navy base here. Then we'll come down the river just a little bit, come back over here, pick up 95 for a little bit, come down this way as we head down towards St. Augustine, which is going to be right down here. And this flight will probably be about 90 miles in total, probably about 35 to 40 minutes in the air. And we're going to land at this airport right up here, Northeast Florida Regional Airport. So that's where we're going, guys. And it should be a decent flight despite some not so decent scenery, but we're going to do it. Okay, so let's get this thing set up. Good to go there. Good to go there. As always, this exact flight plan will be included in the video description, a link that you can open up in a little NavMap. You can adjust it if you like, but I've meticulously drawn this out as usual to get the best look at all the sites that are worth looking at out here. Change that to GPS, and just make sure it actually loads up our flight plan. Get our yoke back on, and let's cruise on down here. Parking brake off. The live weather today is beautiful, but it's super windy. It was like 18 to over 20 knots while we were in the air, and this plane is so little and so light that it was just jerking us all over the place. So I went back to my new favorite airy clouds setting in AccuSeason and turned the wind down to about 2 knots. So this airport's called Deep Forest, which is just a few miles away from my neighborhood, and it is a privately owned place by some of the old school nobility of Jacksonville by the name of Hodges, who've got some major roads and a stadium named after them around here. And they got rich through land ownership in this area, or more specifically, selling that land as the Florida real estate boom accelerated in the 1990s, and it's still booming today. And there's a lot of privacy around this area. I think they might do some flight training out here because there's always people flying over our house and creating stalls and stuff over my house. I can hear them shutting the engine off and just hanging in the air for a second, doing spin recoveries and things like that, which is always kind of fun. But there's another airport a little bit north of this that I know has a lot of flight schools, so I don't know if they're flying out of here or not. But as you're going to see once we get in the air, there's a lot of vacant land out here. One of the few spots where there's still vacant land in Northeast Florida. And those guys own all of it. I'm sure they'll just keep selling it off as those real estate prices keep going up. And once we get in the air, we're going to, if you look down to our left, or if I look down to the left, you'll see a big, private, very exclusive golf club called Pablo Creek. And I've heard that they also have some big hunting grounds out here, which are also very secluded and private. You got to know people to be coming out here. And this airport is an add-on. The other add-ons I've got is one for kind of a photogrammetry for Jacksonville, which actually help with the bridges a little bit, because they're still not great, but they look a heck of a lot better than they did before. The Dames Point Bridge, which is our big suspension bridge here in Jacksonville, and then a lighthouse down in St. Augustine, and the airport we're landing at, just a slight mod for that. All of those will also be linked in the video description. All right, 1 notch of flaps, landing lights on. Everything else looking good? Chet, you ready, brother? Yeah, you are. Don't act like you're not ready. You've been wanting to do this forever. All right, let's do it. And once we get in the air, I need to remember to shut my fuel pump off. Yep, you guys know I usually don't pay for payware airports, but this one is so close to my house that I like flying out of here every now and then when I want to just take a leisure trip. I get a little bit of that wind, not too much though, not too much. I got a little bit of a crosswind from the west. Alright, gears up. Flaps up. And we'll go ahead and set our... Even though there's not an autopilot in this thing, the autopilot will work. Let's go ahead and get our transponder turned on before we get in trouble. So let's go ahead and set the altitude for 2,000 feet. And we'll turn that engine down, which is just screaming. Nav, vertical speed. Bring that down to 500 feet a minute. And pull those throttles back. And the RPMs back. Man, I mean, you can be at about half RPM and half throttle on this thing, as you already know if you have this plane. And it'll still start overspeeding once you flatten out, so you really kind of have to watch that. Which we'll do here. So this area here is locally known as Southside, which is sectioned off by the St. Johns River, which runs to the north and the west. And this is the newest and generally considered the nicer part of the city. And it's also been the fastest growing, thanks to all this vacant land out here. Let's see if we can spot the Pablo Creek Golf Club. This looks pretty good out here, doesn't it? It's just really the downtown Jackson area that has the trouble. And I also got a river fix for the St. Johns River, which was terrible, terrible before I got that. In my last flight, I mentioned that in the marketplace you can now get that. And that helped a lot because all the docks were sunk before and there were trees growing up out of the river. So the San Pablo Club is... we really can't see it. It's right over in this vicinity right here. Right on the other side, a little estuary. In this little channel we're about to fly over right here is the Intercoastal Waterway, which runs 3,000 miles from Massachusetts down around the tip of Florida and all the way to Brownsville, Texas. And in most spots there's a natural waterway behind the barrier islands, but in places without that feature, like right here, they dredge out a big channel like this. And you can see all the houses down there are nice. That's some pretty pricey real estate there. Not quite as pricey as right on the beach, but if it was me, I'd rather live on the Intercoastal so you don't have to deal with all that sand. So right along the beach here is the very high-end community of Ponte Vedra Beach, home to the TPC Sawgrass Golf Course. Regarded as one of the most difficult in the world, and each year all of the city's gold and golf and alcohol lovers head out here to bake in the sun and watch the most boring sport ever invented. Although I've heard cricket's pretty boring too. And there's the golf course right down there to our left. And this area here is also the northern end of St. Johns County, which is the third wealthiest county in Florida per capita, after Monroe and Collier, which are the areas of the Florida Keys and Naples, respectively. And I just saw an article that the most expensive property on the world just went on sale in Naples for $300 million. It's on a big point right along the coast with a bunch of big mansions on it. Notice there are no condos down here right along the beach. I'm going to mention that again in just a second. And St. John's is also one of the fastest growing counties in the country as the rest of the world tries to move down to Florida, for which I don't blame them in the least. And Ponte Vedra here has an interesting bit of World War II history. On the night of June 16th, 1942, a German U-boat pulled up and dumped 4 saboteurs on the shoreline with explosives and American cash. And their attempt was to head up north to damage U.S. economic targets like power plants and steel mills. But they were compromised by one of their co-conspirators who went to the FBI. And all but the turncoat wound up getting captured and executed after a military tribunal, along with 3 more who landed up in New York. There were 4 that landed up there, but one of their guys also turned them back in. So right down there, all these buildings are part of the Ponte Vedra Club and Inn, which is a very, very elite and ritzy place, and they got their own golf course over there too. And that place opened up in 1934. This road running down here is J. Turner Butler Boulevard, which I'll call JTB from here going forward, because that's what we call it around here, and I'll probably slip up and say that. And this is the only road that will connect all the way back to 95, which we're going to fly over in a little bit, that will connect to the beach without any stoplights on it. We'll see a couple of the roads up here. This is Beach Boulevard, then we'll see Atlantic Boulevard, but there's stoplights all up and down it, so people that are wanting to get to the beach quick will take JTB right down here. So we're coming up on the communities of Neptune Beach and Atlantic Beach and then Mayport down there by the mouth of the St. Johns, all in that order, collectively known as the Jacksonville Beaches. And they started building this place up in the early 1900s with the hopes of making it a beachfront destination near the big railway terminal that was built downtown. But somehow everyone overlooked the fact that no one had invented air conditioning yet, so that wound up being a total flop. And today, as you can see, it is still astoundingly underpopulated for oceanfront real estate this close to a major city, which is one of the many reasons I love living out here. As I mentioned in that Miami flight, once you get a little further south, it's nothing but condos stacked on top of condos for as far as the eye can see. This is the Jacksonville Pier right here, which they keep rebuilding and keeps getting destroyed when hurricanes blow through, and then they just keep rebuilding it. But it's a pretty popular hangout. But look at that. They got a few condos, but not many at all. And there's the city right there. Look at that. You can get a little house right along the beach here. Probably pay a lot for it, but you don't have to deal with all of the condos and tourists. And this is a quaint little area down here. Each of these roads kind of going back up into town at the end of them here where they intersect the main drag, which is called 3rd Street, running back behind the beach. They got little shops and restaurants and all that. Just absolutely beautiful. A real nice area. And you won't see a spot that looks like that this close to any city on the East Coast. Look at that. No big buildings at all. Wonderful. All right, we're coming up on the mouth of the St. Johns River, which runs right through the center of downtown. We're going to take it through downtown before it starts turning south. And on this side of it, right over here, we're going to fly over Naval Air Station Mayport, which was commissioned in 1942 to support the Atlantic Fleet. And they closed it down after the war, only to reopen it a few years later to support naval aircraft that needed to come in ashore for maintenance. And by the late 1980s, it had been significantly expanded into a major naval port and is now the 3rd largest fleet concentration in the U.S. And over the years, it's been home port to numerous oil-powered aircraft carriers, or conventional-powered, I guess you might call them, including the Shangri-La, the Roosevelt, Forrestal, and Saratoga, with the last one being the John F. Kennedy before that was decommissioned in 2007. Although I read that they just launched another JFK carrier in 2019. That one's nuclear-powered. And they're currently trying to put plans together to bring another nuke carrier back to Mayport, but I read that they got to get it all dredged out and stuff. They can't bring something with a draft that big back in here just yet. And if you look down here, and forgive me for my lack of military knowledge, they got an airstrip right over here, which we'll see because we're going to cut right down this way. But they got a bunch of ships down here, which do look like the ships they have. So I don't know if those are destroyers or what those are called. Cruisers, maybe? But they don't have any big aircraft carriers. When you would drive down the road here going along the beach, you could always see the JFK moored up right over there. This area right over here is called Fort George's Island, home to the Timaquan Historic Preserve and highest point on the Atlantic coast south of New Jersey, which has to be every bit of a couple dozen feet or so, I would think. And there's not much out there today except for a big park, but it was originally inhabited by the Timaquan people going all the way back to prehistoric times. And as a matter of fact, they found some of the oldest pottery ever discovered in the U.S. down there. So it goes back about 2500 BC. And the Timaquan Indians were all over this area, all the way down to St. Augustine, maybe even further south than that. And in 1814, a slave dealer named Zephaniah Kingsley bought that entire island and made it into a plantation, which, along with the original slave quarters, can still be toured today. And that plantation is right up in this area over here. It's called Kingsley Plantation. And all these things here are not little tents. Those are cars. You can drive your car right down here. They should be cars anyway. Park right along the beach. Hang out for the day down there. Beautiful. You can see some of those ships down there. See that? That's just what they look like, too. If you get close, they look really bad, but from here, they look fine. But old Mr. Kingsley apparently took pretty good care of his human property and treated them pretty well for the standards of the era. And according to some accounts, they liked the guy quite a bit. At least 4 of them liked him enough to marry him. He had 4 black wives. And fearing their safety as the Civil War loomed, he eventually sold the island and moved his family down to Haiti, eventually becoming a Haitian citizen. And I read that that guy was quite a character. Couldn't find any pictures of him. I wish I could. I imagine him being a very wiry, bearded, wild-haired kind of guy. I don't know what all of these things are down here. That's really marshy down there, and I don't know what they have auto-populated down there, but it doesn't look like that in real life. As you can see, it's just a big marsh. So those are probably sawgrass bushes that just got modeled as some kind of little structures of some kind. Alright, down here to our left, we will see a spot where the French tried to beat the Spanish to the punch out here in 1564. which I should note was 1 year prior to the Spanish establishment of St. Augustine in 1565. So take that, St. Johns County. And they built a 3-sided fort somewhere down in this vicinity right here. Though no one's sure precisely where that was, but you can tour a replica of it today, and I think it's going to be right here. We're going to see if we can spot it. I forgot to look last time, so we'll see if it's down there. We'll definitely see it from the satellite map when we take a look at that at the end. But the French managed to hang on for a few miserable months, relying heavily on the local Timucuan population until they pissed them off enough to sour that relationship. And then the Spanish, wanting to have the swampy, mosquito-infested area all of themselves, sacked the fort in 1565, killing about 200 people and building their own fort. There it is right there. Yep, you can see it. But the location of their fort has also been lost to time. So there's a little road out that drives down here called Monument Road that gets out there to that park. And that river fix cleaned this up a lot. You couldn't see a lot of those docks and stuff down there before I loaded that up. In this area we're flying right over now, I'm intentionally flying over it so you can't really see it because that is Blunt Island, also known as Jacksport. That's where most of the shipping traffic gets loaded up, but the shipping cranes, oh, you might still be able to see them a little bit. You can tell they didn't get modeled very well. Not very well at all. And right over here they have a cruise ship terminal. Carnival Cruises has a ship over there. It's one of their smaller ones, and it's small because they have to squeeze it under this thing right here, which is the Dames Point Bridge, and that's another add-on, by the way, which looks much better with the add-on. That's a pretty big bridge. That opened in 1989. And I can't remember which flight it was, but the last time I took only one cruise out of there, and to get under the bridge, the ship had to pick up a lot of speed because it kind of sinks in the water as it goes faster, and it looked to me, standing on the top deck, that we may have cleared that bridge by maybe 5 or 10 feet. It was pretty cool when we went under that thing. That's it there. So this is 295 that circles all around Jacksonville. Of course, 95 runs right through the middle of it. And as we'll see in just a little bit, I-10 dead ends in Jacksonville, which runs all the way to the west coast. All right, so a little bit about the history of Jacksonville before we get to downtown. Let me slow down just a little bit more with the throttle there. This whole area was little more than a Spanish outpost until the British took over at the conclusion of the French and Indian War in 1763. After which they started building a road from St. Augustine up to Georgia, and I think that was mainly for the purpose of moving cattle. And they chose the narrowest point on the St. Johns River to cross the river, and they called the area around that spot Calford, because that's where they were crossing all those cattle. And the Brits handed Calford back over to the Spanish after the defeat in the Revolutionary War, and Spain ceded it, along with everything else in Florida, over to the U.S. in 1821. You know, that looks pretty good down there. It looks really good. I just had such a nasty taste in my mouth after the last flight that I was just being a real curmudgeon about it all. How's it look out your side, Chet? You're not even gonna look at it? I know you're there. You go. Take a peek. Soak it up, brother. Once the American settlers moved down here, they decided to rename the town Jacksonville after then territorial governor and future President Andrew Jackson, and the town was officially incorporated in 1832. And though they were definitely supporters of the Confederacy, the town was mostly unscathed during the Civil War because it was bad enough just to live down here, never mind trying to fight people with all that unsufferable humidity. All right, so we got a bunch of big bridges in the Jacksonville, and you can see, even though they look better, they don't look great. So this is the Matthews Bridge, the Hart Bridge, then we have the Main Street Bridge, which we'll show you over here. These two are not drawbridges. The Main Street Bridge is a drawbridge. And then we have the Acosta and the Fuller Warren, which is what 95 crosses over. Jacksonville enjoyed its obligatory Great Fire in 1901, leveling 146 city blocks and over 2,000 buildings. They eventually recovered, and the city enjoyed its golden years with a vibrant downtown area leading up to World War II, after which everyone started moving out to the millions of acres of sprawl outside the urban core. And sadly, it never really recovered. And like most modern cities today, downtown Jax is not a place where you want to spend any more time than absolutely necessary, which is just so hard to witness because they got all kinds of cool 1940s and 30s skyscrapers. So there's Jacksonville Stadium, and this map is probably from around 1998 to 99 because there's some things that don't exist anymore and some things that do. They built a huge outdoor pavilion over here called Daly's Place where they have concerts and stuff, which is just awesome. There's the minor league baseball park where the Jumbo Shrimp play. Veterans Memorial Coliseum, which nobody plays in, but they have concerts and stuff down there all the time. There's the jail. And down here, this orange thing is called the Landing, and they tried forever to get that going. It had a bunch of shops and restaurants in it. Never really took off, so they finally tore that thing down. There's nothing there anymore except a big green spot. I think there's called the Friendship Fountain. I'll tell you more about that later if I remember to. There's the Main Street Bridge. And they have not built a new skyscraper in Jacksonville since I've lived here. There's the courthouse, which is relatively new. And right down here, this thing is the Prime Osborne Convention Center. And this was where the train lines would come in. And this used to be a huge train station. And this area here was called La Villa, which I'll tell you about a little bit later as well. And you can see now it's mostly vacant property. Just make a mental note of that. So this is I-95 running up this way, and this is I-10, which dead ends right there and goes all the way to the Santa Monica Pier, which we saw on that LA flight. And I've taken that thing all the way to Texas before, and that is a long, boring drive. You can see all the old train tracks. Some of the old cars kind of piled up there. But now that thing is just a big convention center. So after the Great Fire, most of the people moved down to this area, which is called Riverside. Started building up some beautiful big old houses that you can check out down there. And then this thing right here is called Riverside Park, and they got an area called 5 Points down here, which is where 5 roads just come together. And right here is a big museum, a big art museum called the Cummer, which is really nice for a little town like Jacksonville. They got a lot of cool stuff down there. These are all hospitals over here. And the Museum of Science and History is also over there on that side of the river. This section right over here, which we'll see when we take a turn in just a second, is called San Marco, their other historic district. But that one didn't get going a little bit later than Riverside because there was no bridge crossing any point of the St. Johns River until 1921. So once they opened that thing up, San Marco started to get built up. And there's not a lot of big mansions on this side of the river, but they do have a whole bunch of little bungalows in that lovely Art Deco 1920s style. And you can cruise down San Jose Boulevard and check all those out. It's just wonderful. Cruises right along the coast here. It's so nice. So right over here is NAS Jacksonville, another big base that they've got out here. And that opened in 1917 as Camp Johnson, which was a gigantic quartermaster training camp. And it was opened and closed a few times until 1940 when it was officially commissioned as a naval air station. And by 1949, it was the aircraft capital of the East Coast, with 60% of the Atlantic's air strike force operating from that base. And nowadays, they fly nothing but sub-hunters all day long, 24 hours a day, always flying overhead in and out of there. I don't know, there might be things other than sub-hunters. We see some helicopters and fighters coming in and out of there occasionally. But it's non-stop traffic in that place. Look at that area. There are very, very nice houses all along the St. Johns River here. And this is a big bridge here that crosses over into an area called Orange Park, and you can see that something happened where this must be where they stopped modding the river, because after that it looks different for a while and doesn't look good. So we're going to turn back to the east before we get to that. But that's Orange Park over there. They got another little airport somewhere in that vicinity too. All right, we're going to be coming up on a place called the Bowles School, which is a private boarding school established in 1933 as an all-boys military academy, eventually becoming co-ed in 1971. This is it right here. And the school is most well known for its athletics programs, dominating everybody in virtually every sport in the state of Florida, particularly swimming, though, for these guys. They've pumped out dozens of Olympic medalists in swimming over the years. And it is nice. There was an old hotel down there way back in the day before it became the school, which I'm guessing was probably built in the 1920s, which is when they started building everything else up out here. All right, we're going to head back east now, crossing over I-95 again and following JTB back to my neck of the woods. And everything east of 95, which is, let's see here, let me get myself oriented. So these are some big railroad tracks in an area called Phillips Highway. 95 is going to be up here just a little bit more, and then we'll catch up with JTB again. But everything east of 95 and south of JTB really just exploded over the last 30 years or so. There was nothing out here before that. This is 95 right here, running down that way. And there's JTB going out this way. My wife's lived out here since the 1970s, and she said there was nothing but a 2-lane road in her neighborhood out here when she was growing up in the 1980s. And even when I came out here in 2000, there wasn't much more than that. But train lines have always been a big deal for Jacksonville, and you can see the train lines look significantly more substantial than even 95. There's the Dames Point way over there in the distance again. And this airport over here is called Craig Field, and my kids have soccer practice at a park down here by the river sometimes, and if you go and just sit at the, it's just a GA airport, civilian airport, they've got a little pavilion set up right by the runways, and they pipe in the air traffic control signal channel so you can just listen to it while you're watching the planes come in and out. It's awesome. And the controllers are always using these big towers right here. We call it the Tower Forest locally, as VFR markers, trying to get guys vectored into the airport. This area up here is called the St. John's Town Center. That was probably opened up 15 years ago or so, right along JTB there. And that is the newest big shopping area in all of Jacksonville. Before that, there was an area way up here called Regency, probably in this vicinity, maybe over here. And that was big in the 1960s and 70s. And this is Southside Boulevard running down this way, and that goes down to a big mall called the Avenues. That's it right there. In the 1990s, and that's kind of a dump now too. This is where everybody goes these days. And even that's gotten built up a lot more than it looks like there, even in the last 5 years or so. There's my favorite Costco right there. When I first moved out here, this big spaghetti bowl here, which is where 295 crosses over JTB, was just one flashing red light, and everybody had to stop going all ways to get through there, and now it is just a total traffic jam all the time. So here's 295 again running down this way. We're going to have some of my kids' schools right down here. The high school there, middle school, elementary school over here. And my neighborhood is in this vicinity. You can see all of those retention ponds I keep talking about all over Florida. One of those is the one where I caught the biggest bass ever. And this is Bay Meadows Road running up this way, which connects to Southside, and down there is the Avenues area where that old mall was that was big in the 1990s. So 295 comes all the way around this way, hooks back up with 95, which comes up this way, then it crosses over the river again down there where it started to look kind of funny, and heads into Orange Park. There's the high school, Atlantic Coast High School. Go Stingrays. Just out there a couple nights ago. Look how much land is out here. This is all the privately owned stuff by that airport that we took off from. And this area here even has been way, way built up. This is a new development called E-Town, which is encompassing most of this area now. This is not vacant land anymore. And this will wind down here and catch up with Phillips Highway, which runs down into St. Augustine and eventually goes right through downtown St. Augustine. And all of that area down there, it's going to look, again, like vacant land now, just since this map was made, but it doesn't look like that anymore. All right, some fun facts and figures about Jacksonville as we head down to St. Augustine. Jacksonville is the biggest city in the contiguous United States by land area, at around 900 square miles. And on that Miami flight, I said it had the highest population in the U.S., and I thought that sounded a little funny right when I said it, but after further investigation, it is the most populated in Florida, not the whole country. And that's just some vacant land where they were building up E-Town Parkway. Not vacant anymore. There's a little area of town just to the west of downtown called La Villa, which I mentioned before, which is just north of the train station, and which, again, if you took a look when I pointed out, is all vacant lots now. But that used to be a real happening spot at the turn of the 20th century with all kinds of hotels and bars and brothels, and it is where a new style of music called the blues was officially performed on April 16th of 1910 for the first time. And 90 years later, an awful local band named Limp Bizkit would introduce the world to another style of new music called nu metal. And new is spelled with a U, as a testament to just how awful that really is. So this is Phillips Highway going down here. That'll cruise down to St. Augustine. I think we're getting a little bit of freezing as I'm transitioning away from that River Fix area. On a more redeeming musical note, Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers are also from Jacksonville. Leonard Skinner's actually from Orange Park, which is on the other side of the river, right over there. But they performed a lot in Jacksonville. And before there was Hollywood, there was Jacksonville. In the silent film days, it was known as the winter film capital of the world in the 19-teens. And Elvis Presley performed his first indoor concert at the Florida Theater in downtown Jackson in 1956. And you can still enjoy shows at that place today if you can tolerate being downtown for more than a few minutes. And despite having at least a dozen near misses with hurricanes just since I've been down here, Jacksonville has only suffered one direct hit since 1871. All right, I had to fly out here because you just got to see this. This is all also super developed now, but check out this thing right here. This whole development is called Beach Walk, and they built this 14-acre freshwater chlorinated lagoon down there. And they got sandy beaches and everything going around it, and you can definitely spot it from the satellite map, but look at that. It's crazy, and they got huge houses, very big houses right along the sides of it here. It is just incredible. other than the previously mentioned famous musicians, there are a few notable people from this area. Some names you might recognize are Pat Boone, who you probably wouldn't recognize if you're under age 50. And this is how desperate Jacksonville is for some kind of notoriety. Wikipedia said Ray Charles is from Jacksonville, which he's not. He was born in Albany, Georgia, but he was educated at the St. Augustine School for the Deaf and the Blind down by downtown St. Augustine. He never lived in Jacksonville. But the internet says he's one of the famous people from Jacksonville. And on a highly politicized omission, they did not mention Governor Ron DeSantis being from Jacksonville anywhere on the list of about 20 people. DeSantis was not mentioned, but he's from Jacksonville. And that's about it. All right, we're just going to keep cruising down along Phillips Highway just a little bit further. St. Augustine's going to be down here in this vicinity. While we're doing that, I'll tell you some fun facts about the St. Johns River, which is running down this way, all the way down, further and further. It's the longest river in Florida, meandering 320 miles from its swampy headwaters near Orlando before dumping into the Atlantic back there by Mayport. And it's also incredibly slow. The total drop of that river is 30 feet from beginning to end. It's one of the slowest in the world, as a matter of fact, which has led to some pollution issues, as it cannot naturally purge itself. It's a little bit brackish up by the mouth, but for the most part, it's freshwater. And some people call it the bass fishing capital of the world, which might be contested by Lake Okeechobee, which reportedly holds more fish bigger than 5 pounds than any other lake in the world. Okeechobee does. Which sounds awfully nice, but I've fished it twice and didn't catch anything. And I got a quick story about that. Oh, those are all auto-gym, but these are all big developments. Everything out here in St. Johns County. Again, a couple years ago, this is not the fastest growing county in the country right now, but it was a couple years ago. And talk about a real estate boom they have had out here. Just insane. This thing right here is called the World Golf Village, and that place was a little bit ahead of its time, which was its demise. They started building that up in the 1990s and added the World Golf Hall of Fame, which I think they moved down from North Carolina. But because when they built it, and for about 20 years after that, there was nothing else down here, they just weren't getting the revenue to keep it afloat. This is where the Hall of Fame building is, or was. And COVID just completely did it in, and they shut it down and moved everything back to North Carolina or South Carolina, wherever that stuff is. I don't follow golf, so I don't know what's going on with all that, but I've been to a few conventions that they had down there, but I never even checked out the World Golf Village. They got a couple nice golf courses down there, if you're into that kind of thing. So that the last time I went down to Okeechobee for a fishing trip, we hired a guide and everything after our fruitless attempt at trying to fish down there on our own. So we paid a whole bunch of money, got in there, the guy was bragging about how he's been fishing that lake for 50 years or something like that, got into his little bass boat with a 500 horsepower engine hanging off the back of it. I don't know if it was 500, but it was huge. Big enough that the whole front of the boat was lifting out of the water. And he just floored it for about 200 yards until he pulled the rod on the side of this little marshy embankment where there was like 50 other guides all just jammed in there trying to fish this one spot. And we fished and fished and fished and caught nothing until he just pulled us back, and I thought, that's it? That's what we paid for? Very disappointing. So just a heads up, you might be better off trying to go to some spot. That was on the southern end of Okeechobee, so if you're ever down there fishing, don't go where everybody else is. There's the airport we're going to come into. So downtown St. Augustine is right down this way. We're going to come down here, circle around, take a look at all that stuff, and come on back up here. So while we're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about the history of St. Augustine. It was claimed by Spain and founded by Pedro Menendez de Aviles on September 8th, 1565, which makes it the oldest continuously populated European established city in the United States, if you can even call it a city. And it got its name because the Spanish sailors and settlers first spotted the coast of Florida 11 days before landing, which happened to fall on the feast day of St. Augustine. And Menendez had been begging King Philip of Spain to let him come out to the area near Florida to search for the lost galleon, the La Concepcion, which was commanded by Menendez's son. And I don't know if they ever found it or not, but the king kept refusing the request until the French set up shop back there at Fort Caroline, after which Menendez was granted the expedition on the condition that he take care of that French problem, which he did. And then the English gave Menendez a taste of that medicine when Sir Francis Drake sacked St. Augustine in 1586, burning the entire village to the ground. And then the Spanish returned and were attacked a few more times by the French, the English, and the local Indians, the Tamaquans again, with a particularly brutal episode in 1668, prompting them to construct a big masonry fortress called the Castillo de San Marcos in 1672, which you can still tour today, and we'll take a look at as we're flying by. But the British figured they'd take a crack at the new fortifications just for the heck of it, and 1702, just 7 years after it was completed. And they laid siege to it for 58 days, eventually giving up on the effort, but on the way out of town, burning the city to the ground again. But once the Brits and then the Americans gained control of the Florida territory, this place was about the only thing going on down here, so people started eyeballing it as a tourist destination. And one of those people was a huckster named Luella Day McConnell, aka Diamond Lil, who started regaling people with a most likely fabricated story of Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon traveling through the area in search of the fabled Fountain of Youth. And Leon did come through Florida, but he never mentioned anything about the Fountain of Youth in any of his journals, as far as I could tell. Nonetheless, they do have a big park down here, which is somewhere in this vicinity, where for a few dollars you can sip the nasty, sulfury water of what modern-day hucksters are calling the Fountain of Youth. And they also have a big archaeological site down there, which is far more interesting than the Fountain of Youth, in my opinion. A more successful and honest venture was executed by that same Henry Flagler I mentioned in our Miami flight. He was a big oil and railroad tycoon who traveled to St. Augustine in 1882, and there's the big fort right there, Castillo de San Marcos. And he thought this area would be a great vacation spot to pitch to wealthy northerners, so he built a massive Ponce de Leon hotel in 1885, which was one of the first buildings in the country to be wired for electricity, and this is it right here. And it was powered by DC generators installed by Flagler's drinking buddy, Thomas Edison. And today it's part of Flagler College, a big private school down there. This is Matanzas Bay right here, and this thing right here is called the Bridge of Lions, which looks a little bit wet because it was not modeled well. And the original was built in 1925 and had a pair of big marble lions on each side of it. And by the turn of the millennium, it was in dire need of an overhaul, so they built a temporary bridge next to it in 2005, pulled the lions down while they fixed the old one, reopened it in 2010, complete with the original lines in their original spots. This is Anastasia Island up here. And there's another little Spanish fort called Fort Matanzas way down on the other end. We can't see it from here. Can you see it, Chet? It's right about there. You can't see it from here, though. Don't act like you can see it. I mean, you can't see that far. But the Spanish lived out here. Menendez brought his crew out here for a little while as they were getting attacked by Indians back in town. And they moved back to downtown, and they built a little lookout tower right where that lighthouse is today, or very close to it anyway. Way back in the day, the Spanish did, eventually replacing it with a coquina tower, which is that masonry stuff made from crushed up seashells. And that place eventually got washed into the ocean in 1880, but this place was built in 1824 and was already functioning, so it was no big loss to lose the other place other than being a nice historical spot. And just like that, we need to start coming down to our airport. So let's go ahead and drop our altitude down to 1,500 feet. I'll drop it to 1,100 feet. And slow our roll a bit. So the place we're coming into is the Northeast Florida Regional Airport, and it was intended to be for civilian use from the start. Unfortunately, that start was in the 1930s, so like every other airport at the time, it was taken over by the military during World War II. And after the war, it went back to being civilian use, but the Fairchild Corporation built a big factory down there in the 50s, which would modify all kinds of military planes alongside the commercial and GA traffic. But in 1980, Northrop Grumman bought the Fairchild plant and worked on a whole bunch of naval planes until shifting gears towards production of the E-2D Hawkeyes in the 2000s, which we're still pumping out down there today. I always like to peek in their hangars when I drive by, coming down to St. Augustine. You can see them all inside there. And if you've never seen one of those things, they're twin turboprop planes that look kind of like AWACS with those big dishes on the top of them. Alright, so let's stop descending. And we'll take one more turn, and we'll be on final. Alright, gears out. Look down here, too, right by St. Augustine. Look at all these houses, and there's plenty of open lots, too. Can you believe that? And it still looks like that. They haven't really built up that much stuff down there, but it's very swampy, as you can see. Alright, full prop. One notch of flaps. Autopilot off. Some more flaps. Look at that. Look at those beaches. We're like 20 miles from Jacksonville. And they're not huge mansions either. They're just little houses that have probably been there for 50 years. Insane. Alright, landing lights on. Oh, they're already on. We'll just turn them back on. And I left my fuel pump on. Chet, you were supposed to remind me about that. That was your one job. Turn off the fuel pump. Thanks for nothing. Okay, once we get down, I'll just pull over, and then we'll take a look at the satellite map. And then one more hometown tour will be in the bag. And I'm getting a lot of requests for that ornithopter. That dune thing. I've seen a lot of videos of people flying that. It looks absolutely awesome, hilarious, and fun. But I'm waiting to find another otherworldly area to fly over because I want it to look like we're flying around something that you'd see in the Dune movie. I haven't even tried flying yet. I haven't even installed it. I've got so little space on my hard drive. I need to figure out what I'm going to dump if I'm going to put that thing in here. Alright, final notch of flaps. Well, I don't feel high, but the pappies are saying we're high, so let's come down some more. We got just a little 2-knot crosswind. Nothing unmanageable. Gonna trim up a little bit. Got a lot of back pressure on that yoke. And not saying we're too low, but I don't feel like that, so maybe the pappies are off a little bit. Or maybe I'm just not that great of a pilot. Oh, we didn't make the first taxiway. That's okay. We'll hit the next one. Yeah, so all of those warehouses over there are part of the Northrop Grumman plant. And I don't know how accurate that is. The guy that modded this up said that he didn't get the real buildings out here, but he did change the default buildings over. So if you throw this add-on in, it should look just like this, and that's pretty close to what it looks like. And they built, I think in 1997, they built a little cafe down there in a nice little pilot's depot. Of course, a lot of private pilots are always flying in and out to go down to St. Augustine. But they built a place called the Flyboy Cafe up on the second floor, where you can look out over the runway. Great for plane spotting. And they have pretty good food, too. And they have showers and everything. Everything you'd want if you're stopping into St. Augustine for the day. And if you've never been to St. Augustine, you should definitely check it out. Very cool place. I wouldn't buy any real estate here now, though. Once this real estate market turns, there's going to be some very disappointed and broke people out here that have bought houses in the last few years. Alright, we're just going to pull right over in front of this place. And if you're into shooting, there's a big gun range right across the street from this place. That's the one I always go to when I'm doing skeet shooting and things like that. Or clays. They don't have a skeet circuit out there, but they do have sporting clays. Alright, we're just going to park right here. And shut her down. What do you think, Chet? You glad you did it? Yep. I can tell you are. Alright, parking brake on. And we'll shut these guys down. Turn our power off. Okay, here comes a little NavMap. Well, I didn't see any of those ships when we were coming in. Did you guys? I had my shipping traffic turned on, but there weren't any in the river, so I wasn't really looking at the right side of the plane. Okay, so here's that private airport out here. And there's that big private golf course right next to it. And somewhere out here, they have a bunch of private hunting land. So we came up over there and flew over the TPC, which is right down here. Oh, we didn't see the TPC. It was on the other side of the plane. It must have just been, well, here's a part of their course over here. That's a part of it there, but the big part of the course where they have the big tournament every year is right down in here. They got a giant hotel, the big TPC club. It's just incredible. And I think that is the fabled 18th hole. The green is out there on that thing. So you got to tee off from there, hit it over there. If you're familiar with the TPC, I'm pretty sure that that's the 18th hole there. Notoriously difficult. And here's the ritzy Ponte Vedra area, and there's the Ponte Vedra Club. Opened in the 1930s, 1920s maybe. And then we get down to Jack's Beach here. So this is JTB running down through here. And once we zoom in a little bit, you'll see there's the town center. We'll look at all that when we come back around. So here's Neptune Beach, Atlantic Beach, and then Mayport up here. And here's Fort George Island, where the guy bought it to run his plantation. And if you go down there today, you can see some old slave quarters and stuff they have down there. It's a pretty interesting little spot. Interesting indeed, in just the drive-through there. Here's all the slave quarters right here, actually. Look at that. That's all of them lined up in a big semicircle right there. Not many places in the world where you can still see original slave houses. Very interesting. And here's that spot. Let's see if there's cars down here now. And you can see when the tide comes in, look at that. It just makes that vanish. So you better make sure that you're not falling asleep on the beach. If you're going to park your car down there, you can see some cars down there, same old. Because it just goes underwater. All right, and then we have, okay, so there's Naval Air Station Mayport. Let's turn that off so we can just see if we got any ships down there. And you can tell it's those types of ships that were positioned down there. It looks like whatever those are. Help me out if you're in the Navy, what those things are. And this is a big Navy town too. I should know that probably. There's Fort Caroline there, which looks just about like that in the sim. And there's Blunt Island, where all the shipping stuff is. And then here is where the cruise terminal is today. It's right over here. There's not a ship in port right now, but that's where you get on that thing if you're going to take the Carnival cruise ship. Dames Point Bridge, which looks to be a little bit broken in half there. And as we came over here, I didn't mention it because it was out Chet's side of the plane, but this is Jacksonville University, one of two big universities they have here in town. That's a private one, right along the river there. Beautiful. And then we came over downtown here, saw some okay-looking bridges, if I can even call them that. And there's that Daly's place that they built that you couldn't see in the sim. So this is a big amphitheater now where they have concerts and all that stuff. The Jags Stadium there, which they're in the process of trying to figure out how they can rebuild that thing, but they don't know where the Jags are going to play for 2 years while they do that, so they're trying to work that out. Jumbo Shrimp Stadium, Veterans Memorial Coliseum. And there's the Main Point Bridge there. And this is the bridge that 95 goes over here. That's the Fuller Warren. This is the Acosta Bridge here. And this Friendship Fountain, they just reopened this last week. And when it was originally built, and I forgot to look at what the date for that was, it was the largest and highest shooting fountain, if not in the world, at least the country. So that thing just sat there vacant looking like that for as long as I've been here. They just opened it back up last week. How long it'll stay open, who knows. This is the Museum of Science and History, which is pretty pathetic for a city this size. And then there's the landing, which again is not here now. Let's see if we zoom in or out. Yeah, that's what it looks like now. Just a big grass opening. And here's the downtown area. There's the courthouse, which unfortunately is just, I mean, they got all kinds of cool buildings, but it's just homeless people all over the place. It's a mess. You don't want to be down there unless you have jury duty, which I did a few months ago. Courthouse is nice, though. There's the Prime Osborne Convention Center, which was the big train station back in the day, and they got a couple old little trains parked out there you can check out. They have car shows and stuff down there. And this is that La Villa area. So back when this was a bustling train station, this is where all those hotels and bars and restaurants and whorehouses and things like that were. And now it's just a bunch of vacant lots. And this is a big arts middle school where my daughter went to school called La Villa. A great school, really great. One of the few great schools in Duval County, which is greater Jacksonville's county. So that's 95 heading up that way. This is I-10 going out this way. And this is where Riverside is, which is where everyone moved and rebuilt their houses when Jacksonville burnt down in the early 1900s. And there's Riverside Park. And this is 5 Points right here. And this is kind of their old historic street where they got some restaurants, really nice restaurants, little antique shops and stuff. And that's called 5 Points because you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 streets coming into that. And this is that Cummer Museum, that art museum right there. And a little further south is a newer area, also very nice, called Avondale out here. And here's San Marco, one of my favorite parts of town to drive through. This is the oldest historic part, but this really started getting built up in the 1920s once they completed that bridge, which again, just want to reiterate, the first bridge to cross the St. John's, 1921. Unbelievable. They had ferries going back and forth before that, but once they built that, this thing really exploded out here. And then down here is the Bowles School. You know what? Let's real quick. Here's NAS Jax, where all those planes are constantly flying out. And the Blue Angels were out here for a while, too, back in the 1940s. But if you guys are good at plane profiles, these are the things that are just flying over constantly out here. I think these are sub-hunters, and these jet ones, I think, do communications reconnaissance. What that means, I don't know, but that's what they're doing constantly. Do they have any jets out there? There's jets flying over occasionally. Maybe they park those in hangars. I don't see any down there. You guys? Nope. All right, so we came over here, checked out the Bowles School that pumps out all those Olympic swimmers. Look how nice that place is. So nice. All right, and then we came back over here. So here's 95 running down this way, and then we cruised over Southside Boulevard, which crosses JTB here, and my place where I work my day job is right down over here. They got a big movie theater down there, and they got a big headquarters for Merrill Lynch and Blue Cross Blue Shield out here, and then here's the town center. And look at, in the sim, I don't know if you noticed it, this was all vacant land. Hadn't even been built up yet, even on this side of it. And now every square foot of that is built out, and they're still building stuff. And this is the other big university in Jacksonville. This is the University of North Florida, and that's a public school where my oldest daughter is currently attending. Right down the street from my house. Look at that big. This is the one that was just one flashing light back when I first moved out here. In fact, this road ended right here when I first came out here. They hadn't even built the rest of that out. So there's some high schools and stuff. We cruise down this way, and here is the beach walk, which might look a little bit more built out. No, this is an even older map here. But this is all houses and stuff now. And there's that huge lagoon that they had built. And then here's the World Golf Hall of Fame, or where it used to be anyway. And I think Bill Murray was one of the early investors in that place. I wonder if he lost all his money with that. Came out here, there's the airport where we landed. So we cruised down this way, and here's where the fabled Fountain of Youth is. And they got, I mean, unfortunately, St. Augustine, for as cool as it is with all the old buildings and stuff and the fort and all that, is just a total tourist trap. They got like a wax museum and a Ripley's Believe It or Not, all those kind of garbage attractions. The main thing is just the old part of downtown, which I'll show you in a second. But there's a huge cross, I think it's right here, that's sticking up in the air, and they got a big archaeological park out here too. But that's where the Fountain of Youth is. You can go right there, And they'll dip a big, huge ladle down into a tiny little well and pull up some nasty water and charge you to drink it. There's the Castillo de San Marco. Look at that. That's really cool. That's worth going to St. Augustine for that. Cruising right down here is St. George's Street, and this is where all the really old buildings are, and it's not, you can't even drive down it. You can walk down it, though, and they got all kinds of restaurants and bars and shops and taffy and popcorn places, and there's even a big torture, medieval torture place, not primeval, well, it is primeval, too, medieval torture exhibit place down there, which I haven't checked out, but I need to next time I go down there. And there's the Bridge of Lions, and then here's Flagler's big place here. So this was that huge hotel he built up in the 1800s, powered by Edison's generators, and now that is all Flagler College, which is very pricey. And let me just show you real quick where that other little fort is. So this is Anastasia Island out here, and that other little fort the Spanish built is way down here. You can just barely see it through the clouds. They got a little boat dock there, but that's it, Fort Matanzas. And there's not even like any tourist stuff around it. You just have to pull a boat up over there to go check it out. And I've never done that either. And then we checked out the lighthouse right over here, which you really can't see from here because we're looking down the top of it. You can barely see it. That was an add-on too, by the way. If you're flying this and can't see it, freeware add-on, go ahead and throw it in. And then we came in for our landing. And if you're looking for the gun range, it's right out here. This used to be an old dirt track. They had a big dirt oval track out here. And now when you drive around this thing, that's where all the sporting clays are, which is fun. Although I haven't been out there in about 2 years because the last time I went out there, some dude was filming his girlfriend or wife or somebody wearing a leather bikini shooting the largest handgun I'd ever seen in my life. So I just put my stuff back in my car and went home and haven't been back since. And that's what you see in a lot of places in Central Florida. So shooters beware. That's it, guys. That's Northeast Florida, Jacksonville, and St. Augustine tour. I have no idea what's going to come up next. Give me some suggestions. I got a few things possibly on tap, but I want to know what you guys want to fly over. That's it. Had a blast, and even after living here for 25 years, I still learned a thing or two, which is what this channel is all about. Can't wait to see you guys again in the skies. Later.